What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Guntur Kaaram, the new Telugu language action drama out of India, a movie that is a much anticipated reunion between the star Mahesh Babu and the director Trivikram Srinivas, who previously made the movies Athadu and Kaleja, neither of which I've seen. Apparently, they were monster hits in India about 10 or 15 years ago. But if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, you'll know that I'm more or less a blank slate when it comes to Indian movies. However, movies like RRR, which found a huge audience in America, as well as the recent movies Animal and Solar Part 1, they've all played a role in convincing me to follow Indian movies much more closely on this channel. In any case, the title of this movie means Spice of Guntur. Guntur is apparently a city known for its very spicy food, but after this movie, it's going to be known for its very spicy central character played by Mahesh Babu. I cannot put this into words properly, but before the movie started, they played a little highlight reel of some of his older movies, and my packed house just went fucking crazy. I had no idea who this guy was going into this movie, but my audience knew precisely who he was. I mean, whistles, cheers, even some sort of ritualistic call and response chanting going on in the theater. Anyway, it was 2 p.m. here in New York at the Regal in Union Square, which I thought, oh, it's going to be an empty theater. It's 2 p.m. Who's heard of Guntur Kaaram? But yeah, I should just say I was the only kind of aging Caucasian in the audience, and this crowd knew exactly who this actor was, who this filmmaker was, and they were fired up and ready to go. But I'm not quite sure how widely it's going to play here in the U.S. For whatever reason, the Regal at Union Square, which is like 4 blocks from my place, they pretty much play every single wide Indian release on the day of when it launches internationally. I'm not quite sure if that's unique just to that theater or if that's a trend throughout many Regal cinemas. However, Netflix has acquired the digital distribution rights to the movie, but so far I don't believe the release date has been determined on Netflix. But I've been talking quite a bit at this point without offering a single opinion about the movie, so in broad strokes I'll say I like movies like Animal and Solar much more. I mean, those are darker, the action's more savage, they're filled with gore and an incredible mythic, larger-than-life characters. This movie is much more family-friendly, it's much more lighthearted, there are plenty of laughs, and I should admit, 90% of the time when the audience was roaring with laughter, I had no idea what was going on. I'd be like, all right, something funny as fucking shit just went down, but just due to my cultural blind spots, I just had no idea what was happening. And every once in a while, I found myself laughing alongside the rest of the audience. But there were definitely jokes where I just wasn't equipped to understand a lot of the humor at play in the movie. At one point, somebody's making a derogatory statement about somebody apologizing in Hindi as opposed to in Telugu, and the crowd went nuts. I was like, all right, I know a little bit about the differences, but not much. Clearly, I've got a long way to go before I can appreciate all the nuances to Indian cinema. But not to worry. If, like me, you have no idea what's going on when it comes to the comedy of this movie, you can still enjoy the action, which is front and center throughout most of the movie. There's a lot of singing and dancing as well. Strangely, I found actually the singing and dancing to be a little weaker than I was expecting. I like it when a musical number propels the story forward and kind of works more organically with the central storyline. I felt like this movie, it would just kind of stop. It's like, oh, it's time to sing and dance. But there are a couple scenes where it felt like the song was organic to a blooming relationship and romance and that sort of thing. But I would say on the whole, the music by composer, hang on, I wrote down his name, Taman S, if I'm saying his name correctly. That was not the feature attraction. The feature attraction was just the star being kind of insolent and cocky and arrogant and basically trying to invent 1,000 different ways to light his cigarettes. The whole movie, the plot's almost immaterial. You're just there to watch this guy who's the hot guy who's constantly taking his box of matches, bouncing off people's heads, bouncing it off walls, and lighting his cigarettes in dramatic fashion. And much like Clint Eastwood back when he was working with Sergio Leone in the 60s, he loves lighting his matches off people's beards or their faces, just basically showing his contempt for any of his rivals or enemies. And according to the entry over on Wikipedia, this movie had a lot of reshoots and was heavily rewritten throughout the production process, even changing who was the love interest at one point. But the basic gist of the plot is, without giving anything away, the hero of the story plays a guy who was basically cast out and abandoned by his family 25 years ago when he was 10. And now that he's an adult, he's more or less like a self-made man. He's got a trucking / chili pepper empire, which almost feels like he's like a family in organized crime where you have all these different people running very similar industries and they're all competing for dominance over the very lucrative chili trade. And so he's more or less happy to just kind of mind his own business. However, his biological mother, who he has not seen in a long time, she's a prominent politician, and the main character's biological grandfather is a prominent politician. And all hell breaks loose when they ask the hero of the movie to sign a document basically giving up any claim to his name or his family or his inheritance so that his little brother, his half-brother from his mother's second marriage, can be groomed to be the successor to this political empire. And basically, as a way of getting a little revenge as well as a little attention from his mother who's been neglecting him, Mahesh Babu just goes on this fucking rampage. And anytime somebody asks him to sign something, he fights everybody in the room, trashes the place, just, goes fucking crazy. But he always makes sure to seem that he's as calm and cool and collected as humanly possible throughout this movie. He doesn't sweat. His hair is always perfect. He basically has like three expressions. He's always kind of looking into the camera. And because his character has a bad eye from an ember of flame that got in when he was a kid, he's always doing this thing where he kind of looks through his eyes to kind of focus on what he's looking at. And usually that involves the incredibly attractive female lead played by Sri Leela. She is just astonishingly beautiful, and she's got a couple of very alluring dance sequences. Maybe her character isn't as well written as the character played by Mahesh Babu, but she's so beautiful and just so stunning to look at. You basically would just kind of sit back and let your jaw hit the floor, which is how the character played by Mahesh Babu tends to react most of the movie as well. But a strange thing happened to me while I was watching the movie where I started getting really jealous that American cinema doesn't seem to have the same like youthful vitality and energy that I was being exposed to in the screening room. Because I would say the majority of the people there were probably like in their mid-20s. They looked young, but not like teenagers. They looked like young adults who were just big movie freaks. But I can't remember the last time I went to see an American movie where people were, whistling hard and cheering and screaming every time the star did something cool. I mean, I guess what's cool about Indian cinema is that they seem to fundamentally understand that your stars need to be very attractive, and they need to be a triple threat. They need to be able to act, they need to be able to sing, and they need to be able to dance. Or if they can't dance, at a minimum, they need to be able to fight. And the main character, I would say he fights relatively well. He mostly, like his kind of signature move, or the movie falls back on, he just slaps people. When he slaps people, they go flying through walls or go flying over cars and that sort of thing. He's really good at slapping people, and he's really good at his front kick. He only throws a front kick with his right leg, I've noticed. He must have practiced that kick quite a bit. But he's not a martial artist. Like this guy, clearly, he is a lover, not a fighter. And every time he would look into the camera with his beautiful hair, smoking a cigarette, the girls in the theater were just, they were squealing like they were watching Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic in 1997. But the reason I was getting jealous is I feel like film culture is nothing if you don't have the fanatics, like the rabid fans who would skip their own mother's funeral in order to go see a movie that they're excited to see. And obviously, I'm exaggerating. You should not miss your mother's funeral, no matter how good the movie might be. But this crowd was so fucking fired up. And I feel like in order for film culture to thrive and do well, you need incredibly passionate filmmakers, and you need incredibly passionate moviegoers. And speaking of the director, I read this crazy thing ahead of time. The director, Trivikram Srinivas, he originally got his master's degree in nuclear physics, but his love of film and Telugu literature apparently lured him into the entertainment industry. But I love it when filmmakers who have a different background step into the filmmaking world because they bring all that expertise into the filmmaking world. I feel like if all you ever do is watch movies, well, then your movies will probably feel a little derivative. I feel like filmmakers need one area of expertise outside of cinema just so they can, have like a different foundation to draw upon as opposed to every other film freak. But I should also acknowledge that there is a negative side to all this rabid cinemania that I saw on display in the theater. So somebody needs to help me out when it comes to what is the appropriate kind of behavior and conduct for an audience when watching a Telugu language movie, because my crowd, while I love the enthusiasm, it also meant that people were taking flashing pictures of the screen. They had their phones on, like in their row, like they were basically watching videos and taking phone calls. Like the crowd seemed to have a very relaxed attitude towards technology or just having open conversations. I was like, you know what? I am very much in the minority here in this theater. I'm just going to let everybody do their thing. I'm just going to watch and observe the phenomenon. But ordinarily, if I see somebody, watching videos in the middle of a movie, I'm going to freak the fuck out. But I don't know if I was just being the stick in the mud, the mean old guy who has different tastes and preferences when it comes to the code of conduct within a theater. But when it comes to whether or not I'm going to recommend this movie to people or not, I would say if, like the girls in my theater, you have a love and obsession with Mahesh Babu, by all means. It seems like he is the feature attraction. They find him very easy on the eyes, and he's very studly, he's very cool, he's very confident, he's very masculine. He's just, he's an all-around badass. But if you are more inclined to watch an Indian action movie that's got a heavy emphasis on the action, RRR, Animal, and Solar, I think, are vastly superior. And once again, I feel a little awkward even reviewing this movie because it is a lighthearted comedy in many ways, and I wasn't understanding the comedy, so it's like I can't even give an opinion on whether or not the comedy is highbrow, lowbrow, broad comedy, narrow comedy. I don't know if it's satirical or whatever the case might be. I mean, I'm a complete and total moron on this front, so you'll have to rely upon the reviews of people who have a much better sense of Indian comedy than I. But I did enjoy it. It was a very fun afternoon at the movies. It's just not going to be my new favorite movie that I'm going to be recommending or trying to shove down people's throats. But I have a question for anybody out there who knows a lot more about Indian cinema than I do. I'm putting a lot of Indian movies on my calendar to review throughout the year just because I feel like I have a channel devoted to film culture, and whether that's Japanese or American or anything in between, I'm planning on reviewing as many movies as humanly possible this year. And the Indian movies that I have on my calendar so far are Fighter on January 25th, Devara Part 1 on April 5th, and Kalki 2898 AD on May 9th. And that Kalki 2898 AD movie stars the same lead from Solar. So I'm particularly fired up for that. It's apparently going to be some giant, bloated sci-fi extravaganza. So if you know of a cool genre film or just a cool movie period from anywhere in the world that's that's on the calendar that you're aware of, that you want to make sure that people see and review in a timely fashion. I don't review as many old movies on this channel. I love the recommendations people have and say, oh, you need to see this, you need to see that, but it's unlikely that I'm going to review it. I'm trying to get up to speed and learn who are the major directors, who are the major stars, and I want to see at least a couple movies by all the major directors so that I have some context when their new movies come out. So between now and when those other movies I mentioned are coming out, I'll be watching a lot of the movies related to the filmmakers involved, but I am open to any and all recommendations that y'all want to send my way. And to be totally honest, the reason I'm doing this is because I got a ton of traffic from my reviews for Animal and Solar. I'll link my reviews to those movies in the description below. But December ended up being the best month ever for my channel in terms of new subscribers, traffic, and ad revenue. And a big part of that was those two Indian movies, which added a lot more traffic that ordinarily my channel just wouldn't get. And when I look around right now at the kind of the American pop culture landscape in terms of shows and movies that are coming out, I tried watching Echo the other night. It was so unimaginably boring, and the lead had so little charisma and so little acting ability. And when I mentioned earlier how the Indian film industry seems to understand the idea that a star needs to be a triple threat: acting, dancing, singing, and or fighting. They need to have certain skills and assets that they bring to the table, and they need to be physically beautiful. They need to be interesting. You need to be able to sit in a theater and watch them for hours without getting bored. I was so goddamn bored watching Echo, and obviously Echo does not represent the totality of American cinema. But in terms of movies coming out right now, it's slim pickings. Argyle is around the corner, Dune Part 2 is around the corner, but I want a lot more movies and shows to review on this channel. So keep the recommendations coming. I would greatly appreciate it. But long story short, I would say that Guntur Kaaram, it's got a very engaging family squabble at the core of it, where you've got, a tyrannical, dictatorial grandfather who's trying to manipulate everybody's lives and tell them what they're allowed to do and who's going to be groomed for, political success and who's going to be cast out. And then you also have this very emotional story of a son reconnecting with his mother. And you have the very romantic story of the son falling in love big time for the first time. And along the way, you get the occasional fight scene, many of which have healthy doses of comedy thrown in there. But like I said, if you want to see a lot of grown men slapping the shit out of each other and occasionally kicking each other, this movie will deliver on that front. But hopefully the next Indian movie which I see, which will be Fighter, I believe, at the end of this month, I'm hoping for a slightly more satisfying cinematic experience. But I think that's all I've got to say for now, so thank you so much for watching my video. I greatly appreciate it. If you enjoyed my review, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, or hunting me down on Twitter @Colbrax. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.